Well, we've got a lot to get to because the last couple of weeks we've had special episodes. So while producing the agenda this week, I realized we had 3 weeks of stories and developments and politics to get through. So I'm really pumped we've got a good group of guests with us on this panel this week because we're going to be asking a lot of them to go through some pretty heady stuff. Let me introduce him. We've got Dan Ugaste. He's the state representative for the 65th District and an attorney. Dan, glad you're with us this week.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here.
We also have with us Tom Demmer, former state representative. He served for 10 years and is also now the president of the Lee County Industrial Development Association, and also likes to put out fun tweets that confuse the media sometimes, like, hey, maybe I'm running for president or something. What's up, Tom?
You got the joke? Oh, good.
Apparently I was one of the few. We talked about it on last week's episode. Apparently we were one of the few who got the joke. But I thought it was good, so well done. We also have with us Tom Morrison. He was a state representative for 12 years, including being my state rep for a bit. He is currently the VP of Recruitment and Training for the Big Tent Coalition. Tom, how are you?
Good.
Oh, glad to have you. Glad you're here. We also have, as always, Core's political experts. We've got Michael. We've got Chris. Abby and I have been catching up on old shows because there's nothing to watch. We've been watching Married with Children, and basically you are Al Bundy. So if I mistakenly call you Al Bundy during this episode, you'll know why.
You know, it's ironic because my father actually owns a shoe store and he looks like Al Bundy. So I've been getting that my entire life.
Yeah, well, you might get a little extra from me. I don't know what character from that Michael would be, so we got to work on that. Michael, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, doing well. Good to be here, as always.
I like how you posted to our Discord a photo of you from 10 years ago. Like, I don't know, your groupies think you're cute now. We should probably all have Lane bring that photo up. You were cuter 10 years ago. I'm not going to lie.
That's funny. Yeah, it's a little throwback there with Mike Boss before he was a congressman.
There you go. You had a little extra hair there, too.
Yeah, that's true. That was the style back then, I guess, right? Kind of Justin Bieber and grow it out.
Oh, goodness. So Butler is our Justin Bieber. That's
there you go.
That's scary and sad all at the same time. All right, we have to start here. I got to tell you, I can't sugarcoat this. I've been seething since this weekend. J.B. Pritzker just straight up in a speech in New Hampshire called for violence. Anybody who spins it any other way is frankly on J.B. Pritzker's payroll. There's no other way you can spin this. Talking about how Republicans cannot have peace, how our portraits as Republicans will be put in museums reserved for tyrants and traitors. He called for mass protests and disruption. In the context of our politics nowadays, there is no other way that you can spin this. Of course, many people are trying because they all want to be on the Pritzker for president bandwagon so they can make some cash. But for those of us who haven't sold our objectivity, I don't know. What do you guys think? Am I over the deep end on this, or was it as awful and ridiculous as it seems to me?
No, you're absolutely right. And so look at what happened in Pennsylvania with Josh Shapiro and the governor's mansion there. And there's all these calls saying, well, we got to turn down the rhetoric. Okay, well, here's Pritzker just absolutely turning it up to 11, so to speak.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I had it in my notes to bring that up. After that happened, let me read you a quote from somebody who told us we need to calm down the political violence because he was very concerned about the rise in political violence. This individual said, "The world has devolved where attacks on elected officials are happening more frequently. They're dangerous, deadly, and it's a sad situation. There's too much divisiveness. And again, the violence that comes into it should be something that we're all deeply concerned about and push back against." That quote, J.B. Pritzker. So, I mean, just a week before he gives this incendiary quote in New Hampshire, he's saying the violence is too much. We're too divisive. We need to calm it all down because of exactly what you said, Tom, that incident in Pennsylvania. I mean, it's just this dude will say anything in any given moment if there's a camera in front of him.
Well, it's clear that he thinks that his lane is to be like the most aggressive, presidential candidate on the Democratic side. So you see, Whitmer and Shapiro and Gavin Newsom and all of these other, potential candidates on the left that are condemning things like this. And then here Pritzker is, ratcheting it up. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's notable too. This was a big high-profile speech in New Hampshire. This was not an off-the-cuff remark. This wasn't something where he got caught up in the heat of the moment. This was probably the most prepared and rehearsed speech he's given. He knew it was going to have a national audience, and he specifically chose to take this tact. I think that shows, to Michael's point, he really believes he has to be the most aggressive attack dog out there. But I mean, gosh, the way that it's been responded to, by folks across the political spectrum show that maybe it sounded a little bit better when you were, in your own little echo chamber talking to aides about how you needed to position yourself, and you forgot to think about how it might sound to normal folks who are listening to it.
Well, especially when, I mean, their beef with Trump on January 6th was that he didn't stop the violence soon enough or speak out soon enough. Like, I mean, I know that there's a lot more to it, and I get that, but like, this is a prepared speech, as you just said, Tom. Like, this was planned to say this. Like, I don't know. This to me just goes beyond the pale. You literally planned to incite violence versus, their beef with Trump was that he didn't stop it. Like, I don't know, man. This to me was one of the worst things I've seen JB Pritzker do. And obviously for 103 episodes, I've been railing on Pritzker, but this has got to be the worst thing I've seen him do.
There was a way he could have phrased this to where he called for people to organize, have their voices heard. Did much the same just the other day myself. But about what the situation in Illinois. See, here's the bigger problem. Pritzker's out there running for another office when he should be focused on our state. We have huge problems here. High unemployment, high taxes, crime, failing schools. And instead, he's off talking in New Hampshire about, like you said, talking to people in extremes in the range he shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Schmidt, state representative who serves with you, I loved his statement on this, was along those same lines. He said he's either intentionally stoking violence or being extremely naive and reckless in his political rhetoric. I mean, that's exactly what we see here.
Well, let's think about this from a political perspective, Collin. You yourself said that it was planned. And it's not the worst thing in the world in the era where you can really say anything you want in politics and the electorate's not particularly going to care. At least the electorate he's trying to go for here. J.B. Pritzker isn't performing well in national polling, hypothetical polling before the 2028 Democratic primary. We're a long way away right now. But the fact that he's going to be able to get some publicity from this, I mean, some Democrats watch our podcast, but they have already made up their minds about J.B. Pritzker problem. Okay. But this message allows the Pritzker to reach a larger swath of the Democratic Party electorate. And it's going to be on news that J.B. Pritzker said something outrageous in New Hampshire. But you know what? J.B. Pritzker is going to be in the news. Yep. And there's no such thing as bad publicity in terms of politics, especially when you're only polling 3% in the national polls. You got to be a little outrageous. You got to say some inflammatory things. I'm not defending Pritzker for saying this. I think he's 1,000% wrong, and he probably shouldn't have said this. But if you're down to tubes in the national polls, hypothetically right now, you got to say some things. And this is one of the things that Pritzker felt he needed to say to get some publicity.
He's the only one in that lane nationally. So, Chris, I concede your point. Politically, if you're running for president and you don't care about being governor of Illinois, and you don't care that you might incite violence and burn this country down on your path to trying to become president, if all those things are true, this is a smart political move for him, because it does get him press. It does go in that lane because lots of Democrats are angry. Lots of Democrats are willing to pursue violence to meet their ends, and they don't have a champion right now. J.B. Pritzker's saying, hey, guys, I'm your champion. So if you're willing to burn the country down in order to become president, this was a smart play, and it seems like J.B. Pritzker is willing to burn the country down as long as he gets to be president of whatever's left.
Well, and one of the other lines that he said in that speech was something along the lines of, Democrats need to stop apologizing and stop surrendering. And it's like, that's interesting to see that, I'm sure there's a segment of the Democratic base that feels that way. But from my perspective, as a Republican, it's like they've been fighting us nonstop for 10 years straight and being very aggressive. I don't view it as apologizing and surrendering, but that's just me.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I mean, John Curran made a similar point to what you made, Dan, about, hey, listen, you're governor. I mean, in his quote, it was what, I don't remember what the hashtag was, and I don't want to screw it up, but it was all about, hey, listen, you're governor. I was disappointed that a sitting governor would wish such distress as not a moment of peace on the very people he was elected to serve and protect simply because they identify with a different political party. Which, by the way, I love that little phrase, they identify with. That's also a little dig on the Democrats there. But, I mean, it's that point. I mean, Pritzker is right now the governor of every Illinois. He just called for violence against 40 to 45% of the people he's supposed to serve. Like, if you wanted to pursue this language, resign and go run for president. Cool by me. But right now, you're the governor of Illinois.
Well, and I feel like, if you think back over the course of the past couple of years, as Republicans, we have been pretty consistent on this, right? Like whenever they are protesting outside of Frericks' house, we condemned it. The actions that were taken against the Shapiro family, we condemned it. Like now Pritzker's out there, stoking this and trying to encourage, protest and saying that Republicans should have no peace. I mean, it's right out of the Maxine Waters playbook, right? Where she said, you need to get in their face and harass them at the grocery store or at the restaurant. It's just beyond the pale.
This is not an isolated deal either. There was another speech where he called for Democrats to be street fighters. That's even more directly in there. I mean, to stay, be a street fighter, don't let them know a moment's peace, and don't surrender. I mean, these are all terms that are very clearly designed to go beyond just a peaceful demonstration.
Well, and he was on the House floor. I mean, it was Patrick Sheehan who reminded us about this. I mean, he called all Republicans Nazis from the House floor. And remember this when he was giving the speech to the LGBTQ community, where he said, they only respond to a punch in the face. I mean, this is not an isolated incident. You're absolutely right, Tom.
Well, I think I said this on an earlier Smoke-Filled Room podcast. We were talking about Kamala, and way back when, right? This is one of the consequences of a state that has basically one-party rule, because you don't talk to the other side, you don't really care what they think, and you're in a bubble and not realizing how this comes off to just your average middle-of-the-road voter.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tom. We can hear you, but just as a quick note, just so you're aware, the audio is a little bit quiet. So just as you're in the future, come a little closer to the mic. But there's a great point that you made, and hopefully people turned up the volume so they heard that. All right, let's move on to our next topic. I think we've beaten this dead horse enough. Let's talk politics. We always got to talk politics. We spent a good amount of time, Chris, Michael, and I, talking about Durbin announcing his retirement, Stratton announcing that she would run for the seat, and everything that comes with that. But we haven't had any guests yet have a chance to talk about it. So let's talk about it, especially as it seems like Pritzker and his allies are trying to clear the field. Pritzker came out with his announcement that he was endorsing Juliana Stratton, and then so did Tammy Duckworth. They're not going to succeed in clearing this field, though there are some signs that maybe some people are waffling on getting in. But clearly there's an effort here to get Stratton through this without having to have too bruising of a primary. What do you guys think about Durbin retiring, the field, Stratton? Everything's fair game. Jump on in.
I think it's interesting to note how far ahead of the other candidates Juliana Stratton's campaign operation is right now. This is not a surprise that Dick Durbin was, very likely not going to seek re-election. People have been speculating about this, obviously doing some of their own preparation work behind the scenes. So it was surprising that she was really the only one ready to hit the play button on her campaign announcement. They had the videos produced, all these things put together already. For the others who have sitting on a big pile of cash, it's not like they have to wait to fundraise or anything. It's surprising they haven't had somebody else who's matched that level of preparation and immediate execution.
Yeah, I called it political malpractice last week, Tom. You're 100% right. I mean, everyone knew that at least there was a possibility of this happening, and we're talking about big budgeted operations. You can't afford to have a logo in place, a press release ready, a video ready. That's just, as I said, it's malpractice in politics to be that unprepared.
Well, and I think, like you said, there's this effort kind of on their side to clear the field with these endorsements. But as we know, clearing the field, that's a double-edged sword. I mean, yeah, you can kind of save yourself from, some of the bruising from a Democratic primary or maybe moving to the left. But on the flip side of that, if she's just coasting through a primary, then she's not laying the groundwork for, like the primary is kind of like the trial run, right? Like get your staff, like prioritize precincts, knock doors, yard sign locations, all of these things, raise money. She's not gonna, if she can clear the field, she's not gonna have some of those hurdles to cross that make her a better candidate.
I keep begging Lane, our producer, to give me the around the horn ability where I can give points. Michael, if I could have, you just would have gotten a bunch of points because you're 100% right. And let's be real, Stratton has not had to have a real race. Her first race was won by outside sources who just wanted to wipe out Ken Duncan. She hasn't really had to run a real race and certainly nothing statewide. Suddenly now, if they do succeed in clearing the field for her, it might be the worst thing for her because she's going to be ill prepared for the general election. So that's a great point, Michael.
Well, look, my point. It's been a week into this U.S. Senate nonsense. I've already been proven wrong about something because last week I had said that it would be in the Stratton campaign's best interest and that they would hold Pritzker's endorsement for a little bit, and that's what I thought they were going to do. Guess they're not as smart as I thought they were because they didn't do that. Because listen, you drop big endorsements like this when you want to clear the field. But here's the thing: this isn't a field you can clear. There are people who have been preparing for this for a while now. Are you going to, is JB Pritzker endorsing Stratton going to tell Raja Krishnamurti, hey, maybe I should really rethink this one, guys? Like, I don't think so. I think Raja has been, when Stratton was said that if Durbin doesn't run, I'm running, everybody should have understood that, like, Pritzker is going to support her. Personally, I thought the Duckworth endorsement this early was a lot more effective than the Pritzker endorsements early. You knew that one was coming, but getting Duckworth's endorsement a little bit early, it kind of prevents all the other candidates from doing that. I thought that was more effective than Pritzker's because clearing the field, it's not going to happen. People are going to run, but you need to handicap them with endorsements where that they could have gotten otherwise. Pritzker was not one of them. Duckworth maybe was.
Well, I mean, the only area here, Chris, that maybe they could be proven brilliant is it does seem like Underwood's starting to waffle. I mean, she hasn't staffed up like the rest. There are rumors that maybe she's rethinking whether or not she wants to run. And as we talked about on last week's episode, Underwood is the only one who could go to, at least logically, who could go to Stratton's left and cause her a serious problem in the primary. If they can convince just Lauren Underwood not to run, that might be worth all of this.
Just two other things, though. You started by asking what we thought of Durbin's retirement. About time. We need new leadership in Washington, D.C. But the last thing, just to what Chris was saying, and I understand what he's saying about the Pritzker endorsement not being a big surprise or unexpected, but some part of me thinks it's a little bit of attempted checkbook intimidation. Mm-hmm. If you're going to get in this race, she has a checkbook behind her possibly, and that's something you're going to have to face. That's what I'm wondering if that was aimed at or not. Not that it's been put out there, but that was the first thing I took from it.
Yeah, it's fair.
I think the Duckworth endorsement's interesting too, in that, the other contenders we're talking about are Democratic members of the congressional delegation. Presumably they've had a lot more opportunity to work with their Democratic senator, and maybe those relationships are. It's interesting that she comes out so early for a current statewide elected, a lieutenant governor, not a partner in Congress.
I mean, the full picture will be known, I'm sure, soon enough. But it does seem like there's a grand deal going on here. I mean, the more and more that I see, like, let's just talk like Cat Facts talking about Pritzker, it seems like they're laying the groundwork for Pritzker to run again, choose a running mate, and then instill them as governor a month, couple months in, a year or two in, whatever, as he shifts to running for president. So there's a whole plan here. There's a whole strategy here. You're going to get this. You're going to get that. You're going to get this. If you play ball, you're going to get that. That's all been done. We don't know the scope of it. We don't know the final deals that have been made, but it's interesting to see people like Underwood kind of waffle on this. You wonder what she's being promised and what she's being given to do that. Because we said, I mean, listen, look at what Stratton has done. Look at her interviews. Look at the videos that she's put out. She is running as a far left progressive Democrat. She's not running as a far left progressive Democrat. She is charting a more middle of the road, at least, for a far left progressive Democrat path than we would have expected. That works in a general. That helps in a general, but in a primary, that does not. If somebody with some money or some chops runs to her left, she's in serious trouble. So again, this is all intentional. You wouldn't have her run out the gate. Just look at some of these interviews where it's just it's milk toast, is what we said in our internal Discord. Like, she made no news. It's boring. It's milk toast. The videos, it's like that. She's just trying not to screw this up versus like rallying the base. This is not the Stratton that we know she is. And so there's got to be a strategy here to make sure she avoids someone primarying her on her left. Otherwise, this could fall all apart.
Yeah, it's a big gamble, right? If you're running, from the beginning, like middle of the road and talking about, the grocery tax and things like she has been talking about, if they're not able to clear the field and somebody gets in and runs to her left, she could have some serious problems because then
Yep.
she's going to have to correct. And you know how Democrats are, they overcorrect.
Which, I mean, again, great for us, but I think they're taking a gamble here for sure. All right, let's talk about the Republican side. There is growing concern and discontentment amongst Republicans throughout the state about the lack of serious candidates that we've seen. So while word comes in of all the different candidates who are looking at possibly running for governor or for Senate on the Democratic side, and then what seats they might be vacating, and then who wants to run for those seats. You've got a lot of serious contenders, well-funded, experienced contenders who are lining up at the Democratic side for those various seats. On the Republican side, here's the movement we've seen. You see our Kerry Caparelli, the perpetual candidate in Cook County. Apparently now he's running for United States Senate. So add him to Doug Bennett and John Goodman as the who candidates on the Republican side for U.S. Senate. A couple weeks ago, Joe Severino decided to announce that he was running for governor on the Republican side, even though he just ran as a Democrat 2 years ago. His whole policy, it looks as if, like all his policies, he should just be running for mayor of Chicago. It has nothing to do with Illinois. It's all Chicago stuff, but whatever. He's not a serious candidate. And then he just got in a big fight with a bunch of Will County Republicans and lost himself a bunch of support on the first day of his campaign. So that was pretty dumb. And then for some of these congressional races, we're seeing candidates who've already lost, who didn't come anywhere near winning, are already announcing to run again. There's a lot of concern on where are our real candidates. I mean, Mendrick is the only so far, I guess you could call him a semi-real candidate, but his fundraising's been super lackluster. Everyone's wondering, do we have any serious statewide candidates for 7 openings here? Most likely. Who do we got? And it's May as we record this. We are way behind. 4 years ago, we had candidates announcing 3 months ago. We're already in May. So what's going on? What are you guys hearing? Is there any hope out here to get some real candidates?
I think you'll end up seeing some come to the forefront. I can't say who for sure may end up announcing for anything. There's a number of people. Let's face it, they've held more statewide offices over the last 20 years than we have. We've had very few statewides, unfortunately. The last U.S. senator we had was Mark Kirk. The bench isn't real deep in that regard, and they, with the maps, have beaten down our congressional delegation. Besides us losing population and losing size in the overall delegation, they've taken what was basically and what other areas are telling us should be much closer to a 50-50 congressional delegation and turned it into a 14-3. So it leaves our people with name recognition maybe not as seeming as deep, but I think there's talent there, and I think we'll see it surface in probably not too distant future.
Certainly hope you're right. I mean, we're so desperate for candidates that a clearly funny, just having fun tweet from Tom Demmer, got TV play from Chicago because they needed to name some Republican who was actually looking at run for office. Like, that's how desperate we are for, like, hey, could we please have a candidate?
Well, but they also know a quality person when they see it.
There you go. Look at that. Tom getting some love. Look at that.
Oh, I think, Collin, I think it is a important point too, that this is not just about finding a candidate for governor. I mean, there are a lot of seats that are going to be up, potential for even more as some of the musical chairs kind of happens. And even if you're not going to be able to, amount a winning campaign in many of those positions, you still want to have somebody who's able to deliver some kind of piece of the message, who's able to talk about an important issue, because that's going to have impacts up and down the ballot too. If somebody's able to even successfully kind of run as maybe a single issue type candidate and just really beat the drum on a topic that could help with voter mobilization, it could help, give some cover to people who want to talk about important issues. So yeah, it's not just the idea of let's try to find one unicorn candidate and then everybody else will just, jump on whatever coattails could possibly exist. But it's trying to find something to round out to say the Republican Party in Illinois has something to say. We have people who are out there who care enough about saying it to put their names forward. And we're going to try to, give the best effort we can, even though we're not going to be the best funded campaigns in the state. We're going to have those disadvantages. We need to have something to say.
Well, I mean, if you look at our best performing statewide candidates over the last 6+ years were Leslie Munger for controller, Tom and Dan Brady. I mean, they were not the headliner candidates. Our three best statewide performers were, a little bit down that ticket, a little bit down the ballot for the other statewide offices. So, that's where we've seen a little bit more success. So we can't just look at the top. You're 100% right.
And we have the issues too. I mean, again, when you're talking about 80-20 issues, the public is with us. We just have to have good, effective messengers who just continue to pound that message home.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen poll after poll that as Democrats nationwide and especially in Illinois keep chasing this, magic ball further and further leftward to where you can't even call them far left anymore. We need a new term. The voters aren't going with them. So, Tom, you're right. We keep talking about it. We have opportunity, but we also need to step up and actually grab a hold of it.
I think one of the problems is that there are a lot of quality representatives in this state. A lot of them are young. They've only been in office for 1 or 2 terms. And even still, if they're quality, they might want to move up, but they don't want to risk running for a higher office in a year like 2026 with no institutional Republican Party support to speak of, and then lose. And then you were state representative, or you were state senator, or you were on the county board, and now you're nothing because you decided you want to run for Congress. You want to run for Senate. Like that's one of the issues.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I certainly understand we don't have much of a bench, but you make your own problems. How long have we been screaming we need to build a bench? So now we're complaining, well, we don't have a bench. Yeah, because you didn't build one.
No, it's just not as deep as I think we'd all like. There's a bench. It's just how deep it is.
Yeah, maybe I'm just a little cranky today. I don't know, but it's May. So if you're out there and you're thinking about running, I'm just going to say it, get your shit together. Let's go. It's time to move. All right, let's keep moving along here. So let's talk about Springfield. We've been saying for a while now, tax increases are coming. And by we, I mean us and everyone who's been on this podcast for the last year, including some of you guys. We've all been saying it. And of course, we get called doom grifters and spelunkers of misery and all the other Pritzker terms that as Governor Gaslight likes to pretend like everything's just fine. But here we go. Just in the last week, what we've seen. You saw Senator Mark Walker come out earlier this week and talk about how there's revenue increase plans, including a progressive tax. They're doing bus tours around this. Clearly, there's an organized effort. And then today, on Thursday, you saw a press release about 20 state lawmakers on the Democratic side, and the House side, including leaders of multiple caucuses. This isn't just a bunch of far left progressive Dems. I mean, this was a coordinated effort, and it was clearly poll-tested language. Like, there's a lot of effort behind this. This is not just a run-of-the-mill thing. This is poll-tested messaging. This is a coordinated plan. How they've now filed in the House. They've now filed a resolution, there we go, to amend the Illinois Constitution on the fair tax or progressive tax. And now you see a bunch of progressive groups coming out pushing for $6 billion in new revenue, including tax increases on businesses, on family farms, all sorts of tax increases totaling over $6 billion. And then you see in the Senate a bunch of Senate Democrats lining up trying to raise taxes by what some people are saying is as much as $3.7 billion in order to provide a massive change to paid leave. I think, what is it, 18 weeks? Hold on, 18 weeks of paid leave would be required in Illinois, and it'd be a huge tax increase, which would be calling a jobs tax, because both employees and employers would pay this massive new tax increase. It's happening. What we've been warning about for months and months, if not a year now, it is happening right now as we get into May, which is budget month down in Springfield. So I think it would be unfair to not start with Dan, who's in the fight right now down in Springfield. But for all of us who've been warning that these guys would have to raise taxes to balance the budget, here we go. Look at it. We weren't lying.
So, yeah, it's the same old story, unfortunately, from the other side. The interesting thing, and I'll just start with this, doing a Chamber of Commerce presentation with the leader just about a month or so ago, and one of the other panelists was a Democrat House member saying, well, she thought there was still more money to get out there, that we haven't increased taxes as far as we could and keep going. Just hard to believe. Yep. I don't understand what they don't get about our tax bases shrinking, about our property taxes are increasing in part because people are leaving, businesses are leaving. We're not growing at the rate we should. It's cat leaves Citadel leaves, Tyson leaves. Our corporate collections, the revenue stream is going down. So I suspect we'll probably see something again. And as Tom and Tom both know, we'll probably see it about 3:30 or 4 in the morning, unfortunately.
Over Memorial Day weekend.
Yep.
Yeah.
They already have you guys scheduled for session over Memorial Day weekend. Like, this is clearly planned.
Right. Well, the weekend isn't there. They'll take us into the 31st. I think that's a weekend in and of itself, and they'll wait until the wee hours because that's a Saturday and Sunday, and make sure that no one's paying attention whatsoever, and pass it then if they're going to do it. I suspect they'll do something. You're also hearing about it in order to try and do something about the transit issue. So.
Well, Dan, I'm sure you saw this, that I was kind of chuckling to myself because now there's some word that they want to push the revenue discussions on the transit reforms until after the primary filing deadline so that, none of these Democrats have to worry about getting primaried, or even maybe Republicans don't have to worry about getting primaried for voting for the revenue side of it. So they clearly know this won't be popular, but the fact that you got to try to sneak through the revenue side of this stuff, that should be your first sign that maybe you should be doing something different.
Well, there's pension talk. So part of me wonders if they're not floating a lot of this extreme stuff out there, just so when they do raise taxes, maybe it doesn't seem as draconian. But Tom and Tom have as much or more experience than me doing it, even though I'm still here. They've been through a number of these, so maybe they can give you a little insight themselves.
Well, I just feel like it's bad.
Mike,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let's let Tom and Tom go in as
Right,
former legislators, and then you can jump in.
Go ahead.
Go for it, Tom.
Okay, well, I was going to say, so this coalition of groups, they call themselves the Illinois Revenue Alliance. And I looked at their briefing, and at the introduction, they said, did you know that Illinois' tax system is currently the 8th most unequal of all the states? That households with the lowest 20% of family incomes pay more than twice the percent of their income towards state and local taxes compared to the top 1% of incomes. And then lastly, Illinois has the second highest effective tax rate for those with the lowest 20% of family incomes. Okay, so again, stressing local and state. And this is where candidates and activists and volunteers and every Republican in the state of Illinois, you have to help connect dots with your neighbors, with fellow voters, with the media, and constantly press that issue. Now I live in Cook County. Okay, so and I think we're going to talk about it later, or certainly we know that taxes are an issue, whether you call it taxes or cost of living or both. But I would always remind my voters, wait a second, which party runs the city of Chicago again? Which party runs Cook County, has 16 of the 17 seats on the county board? Illinois has more units of government than any other state in the country, and we know that that's a problem. The good government groups know that that's a problem. Okay, well, who runs the state? Who's got the governorship? Who's got supermajorities in the House and the Senate? And yet here this alliance group is calling it out and saying, oh yeah, this is a really bad problem for lower and middle income families. And then later on, they talk about where the money would go for. So if we raise all these taxes, we need to support immigrant communities. Okay, so like what, another $1 billion for people here illegally? Is that what we're going to pay more for? School funding. Well, what does that include? More money for the teachers' unions, more money for administrators and education bureaucrats, strengthening public transit. Okay, again, you see declining ridership. Why is ridership so bad? Well, hybrid work is one factor, but another major factor is crime. The riders don't feel safe riding on these. It's not clean. It's not taken care of. You're blowing money on things like high-speed rail instead of investing in more security or in cleaning up the experience for riders on these services. Anyway, I don't mean to dominate, but it's just hilarious how the very people in control make things really bad and then demand more money.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's sort of the whole thing, right? It's make everything horrible and then please now give us money to fix it. It seems to be an essential part of their strategy, and it has been for years.
I think there's two really important issues in this. The first is, we have had a lot of conversation over the past year or so about cost of living, about the inflation pressures that put on individuals' budgets. Then we combine that with Illinois has got the highest combined state and local tax burden of any state in the country. These tax hike initiatives are just one way to throw more fuel on the fire of cost of living problems. This is something that affects every single family. And, even when they try to pass some backdoor, complicated, tax that's supposedly only on business, all of those things are feeding into the higher cost of living for every single family across the state of Illinois. But the other piece that we cannot lose sight of is if we even just go back to the first year of Governor Pritzker's term in office, his first budget was $40 billion. The proposed budget this year is $55 billion. If you start factoring in some of these tax increases that are being talked about by legislators or advocates, we've been almost at $60 billion or more. That'd be a 50% increase in state general revenue spending just since Pritzker's first year. So not going back to some, 2002 comparison, in his own term, 50% increase, $20 billion in additional state spending. This is not a problem of not having sufficient revenue. This is a problem of having insatiable spending.
No. Michael, you've been bringing the heat today, so sorry to make you wait. Go ahead.
No, it's all right. I think, you look at it, we're paying the highest overall tax burden in the nation. I saw on Twitter today that if you make $79,000 a year in the state of Illinois, which is the median income, that you're paying more taxes than anybody in the country. So it's insane. Then they have these proposals to raise taxes even more. You see the $6 billion proposal here, and you look at nationwide, all of these major corporations that are talking about investing and building and creating more jobs in the United States. And where are they doing it at? Ohio, North Carolina, Florida, Indiana, Arizona. There's these major companies that want to, bring more jobs to this country, invest more in this country, and they're looking everywhere but here. And then, you can't blame them with the numbers that we've got. And then they're actively looking for opportunities to make it worse. Like they could do some things to attract some of these businesses and say, hey, come invest in Illinois, but they have no interest in doing that. And that explains why our unemployment numbers, lag behind, all of our neighbors. They're growing. We're shrinking.
Yeah, listen, kudos to the NFIB for speaking out about Senate Bill 2413, which is the job tax. Like, as Tom Demmer said, I guess I got to use last names here. I always forget we got multiple Toms on the podcast. As Demmer said, some of this is for new spending. And then Tom Morrison said that that group that wanted $6 billion, it was for new spending. None of this is, hey, let's pay down our pension debt, or let's increase our rainy day fund, which is, by the way, the lowest in the country, or let's balance the budget because it's $1 billion plus out of balance. Like none of this is to balance where we are. It's to add even more spending to our spending base. This new job tax, 18 weeks of paid leave, 18 weeks. And everyone's going to pay that for the party of the working families, which Democrats claim to be. I'm looking at this list of all the sponsors of this bill. They've all done ads. They've all done, we are here for working families. Well, guess what? 40% of this will be paid by employees. So this is a tax on working families, directly on working families, yet they're claiming we're for working families. It's just absolutely ridiculous. All right. Anybody else have thoughts on this? Chris, you've been pretty quiet over there, buddy.
Well, I would only say that I'm interested to see how far this actually gets. There was enough of a brouhaha at the end of last year's budgeting in regards to a lot of the moderate members of the House Democratic Caucus, some of whom stated that they would never be a part of such a process ever again if it goes the same way. If they're going to shove larger tax increases and revenue increases down the Democratic Caucus's throat going into Memorial Day weekend, I can see these things getting a little bit ugly. Inevitably, I think they're going to have to do it. They have no really interest in cutting anything, it seems, other than what they've proposed already in relation to undocumented immigrant healthcare, which was at the beginning was unaffordable, then it was the best idea in the world, and now it's unaffordable again. So it's interesting, isn't it? But I'd be curious to see what this looks like once it gets to Memorial Day weekend. Right now, it's just speculation. Anybody can throw numbers out there in terms of what they want to increase revenue by, but I want to see what the finished product is going into the end of session.
Chris, you're right, but here we are, beginning of May. Where are the moderates? I mean, last time around, we kept hearing these moderate Democrats aren't going to let this happen again. Where are they? Where are the moderates then? Because we got a couple weeks left here of this session. This budget is steaming towards completion here. Where are these supposed moderates who are going to step up and say we got to be fiscally responsible on the Democratic side? I'm still waiting. I'll just end it with that. All right, we're going to a topic that's kind of fun. We've been looking forward to this. Let me set it up here.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
That escalated quickly, our debate. Sometimes it's me debating somebody, but this time we have a guest who specifically requested to be on the podcast because he wanted to take Chris to the woodshed and let Chris know that he was wrong. So this is a debate between Dan Ugaste and Chris Jackowiak. I'm already on Team Dan, let's be real. But talking about the legislative maps, and Chris specifically made a comment a few weeks ago that Dan doesn't agree with. So Dan, you get the first word here. What's your thoughts on the legislative maps?
So the legislative maps are, when they first came out, we all knew they were a problem. I mean, it was clear. Maps have been a problem in Illinois for a while. It's just the extent of the problem was unknown. So I don't know how much everyone's followed this. We filed the lawsuit earlier this year, hired Joey Chen, who's a national expert out of the University of Michigan, assistant professor. He's done work nationally, both sides of the aisle, nonpartisan. And his opinion's been used where maps have been overturned and courts have looked and said, you know what, you need to go back to the drawing board. And basically what he did is he looked at our maps and said, these are really, and we put it this way, sinister in almost two ways. First of all, they're supposed to be compact when they're drawn. And in looking at the current map as drawn, versus a map that the Supreme Court the Supreme Court of Illinois threw out in 1981. He's able to measure those using nationally recognized standards, and usually using the two standards found that there were 52 districts out of 118 that don't meet the compactness standard. So we have 52 districts that are just drawn that are drawn just so they squeeze the right voters in the right places. One of them's held together by the Illinois River. There's not even anyone living there. It's the Illinois River. That's where they are in this. And then he said, to go beyond that, what they've done is they've packed and they've cracked these districts. They've packed the heavily Democrat ones with Republicans. So no matter how many or how good a year it is at the top of the ticket for us, like with Trump, this past year improving, and where we've had others in the past, the map becomes more effective when it happens because they're packed in districts they can never win because they're too heavily Democrat, or they've been loaded into districts that are already heavily Republican. And there's this vast middle that's been made so possible to flip a few of those, but most of them are going to end up in Democrat hands anyhow. And it's that problem that's the biggest problem for us. And the way he demonstrated this was that he ran 10,000 simulations, drawing constitutional maps, looking at the Voting Rights Act, the federal law, and making certain we had enough majority-minority districts according to what the Democrats had set up, and then drew compact, contiguous, and maps of equal population as required by Illinois Constitution. And out of 10,000 simulations, not one simulation came up with the outcome we have today, which is 78 Republicans, or 78 Democrats. I wish there was 78 Republicans, 78 Democrats and 40 Republicans. So, what this tells you is how bad these maps truly are. Now, does that mean we can't win some of those seats? No, and we're working on it. We're figuring out new things all the time and working in that regard. But it is a much more significant challenge than it's ever been, and the number of places where that exists is, I think, pretty clear.
All right, Chris, tell us why you're wrong.
So I don't know what Dan's point was. I had done a lot of research, like a whole notepad worth of data and research going back to the last two remaps, because my understanding was that Dan's point was going to be this map is bad in relation to the last two maps, but he basically just said that this map is bad, which I
They said
Never,
he
never disagreed with.
But he ended with the point that this is the worst that it's been. He did end with that point. So go ahead and give your thoughts.
I mean, let's look at where things are at. So far, the 2020 remap, in comparison to where things were prior to it, has netted the House Democrats 5 seats and the Senate GOP 1 seat compared to where things were in 2021. At the end of the 2001 cycle, the House Dems had after the 2001 remap, I mean, throughout all those cycles, the House Dems had netted 2 seats, the Senate Dems had netted 8. At the end of the 2011 remap, the House Dems had gained 9 seats, the Senate Dems had gained 6 seats. Okay? These are all bad math. Okay? They were drawn with the specific intent to take seats away from the Republican Party. And yet, in 2004, the House and the Senate GOP picked up seats. In 2010, the House GOP picked up 6. The Senate GOP picked up 2. In 2008, it was a wash in the Senate. And on the 2011 remap, the Senate GOP picked up a seat in 2014. The Senate GOP picked up 2 in 16. And the House GOP picked up 4 in 16 and 1 in 2020. So my point, and during the course of our great debate, was that ever since the 2001 remap, there have been bad maps in the state. And I was entering this discussion willing to concede that the congressional maps are worse, which I think we can all universally agree that this congressional map is the most egregious congressional map in comparison to the last couple of cycles. I think we can all agree on that point. My point overall was we cannot use maps as the only excuse to why the Republican Party can't win seats in this state. I think the Republican Party needs to look at the map, identify which seats it can win, not be overly ambitious, because when you're overly ambitious, you exhaust too many resources. You try picking up 5, when in reality you can pick up 2, and you end up picking up 0. Okay, it's still early on in the remap process. Okay, by this point in the 2011 remap, the House Dems had picked up 7 seats, and the Senate Dems had picked up 4. Okay, that was after 2 cycles there. In the 2001, the House Dems had net 3, and the Senate Dems had net 5. Okay, so we're only 2 cycles in. But right now, we're seeing a positive showing in the Senate. Now, obviously, that's a little bit misleading because we still have another cycle before all the senators are up. But we're down 5 in the House. But by this point, we were down 7 in the House after 2011. So I'm not really sure what the representative.
It's a lot of numbers, Chris. And as a comms guy, I'm going to tell you, you lost your entire audience about 15 minutes ago. But let me just say this. The one thing you're missing, Chris, is the rate of diminishing returns. It's a standard economic principle, but the idea is, that how many more seats can you lose? I mean, before this last remap, many people were like, hey, how many more seats could the Republicans lose? This map is as bad as it could get. And then, to your point, we lost a little bit more, but at a certain point, you can't lose more. So by pointing to, hey, listen, the previous maps were you lost more, I think you're ignoring the fact that at a certain point, you can't lose too much more. So I don't know that you're proving the point you think you're proving.
I don't know what point I'm supposed to prove here because I don't understand the point that Dan was trying to make.
My point is the maps have gotten worse. It's not the fact that we cannot win seats. You're right about that. And focusing on few seats, I think I agree with you, Chris, is appropriate. But what I think focusing on 5 or so seats is not out of the realm of possible and not too many. And also, if you just consider this fact, in 2022, the election, we had out of 118 seats, we had a few more candidates than the Democrats, but House Republicans got 50.9% of the vote. Democrats had 40-some. We end up at 78-40. Hear me out. 2024, Democrats get 55% of the vote. We get 45. We're still at a 78-40 split. Not only did we not win an additional seat, House or Senate, but they didn't either. And they spent 6 times as much money as us. So that's where my point is. The maps play a much bigger role in this than I think most people understand. Or believe. Put it that way.
So I just want to say I'm not disagreeing that maps play a role in this. I'm not disagreeing that the maps are egregiously unbalanced in favor of the Democratic Party in the state. None of that is what I've ever disagreed with. My point was that there have been lofty maps for the past 20 years, and the Republican Party should stop complaining about the maps every time they lose. The Republican Party should identify districts they can win and then try and win those districts. Okay? It doesn't do us any good 4 years after a map is drawn to file a lawsuit and then be shocked when we lose it. It doesn't do us any good to do that. I understand that there is perhaps a legal argument from compactness or whatever that the map isn't legal. I understand. But when we file this lawsuit 4 years later, it just looks like we're playing sore loser. Let's start playing some politics. Let's start cutting Democrats off the knees in some of these districts, okay? Every time I hear a Republican complain about the map, I just roll my eyes. Because what are you going to do? If you bitch enough, that a Democrat's going to finally listen to you and draw a different map? No. What you got to do is you got to start winning in places where you didn't win it. They didn't think you could win.
No, while you file suits like this, even 4 years later, is you hope that the Illinois Supreme Court will do the right thing. You know, they threw this out on timeliness, on their own motion. Yet the very issue and the biggest Supreme Court race in any state's history up in Wisconsin, as far as biggest, most money spent, was entirely about the maps. They're about to talk about their maps again and redo their maps up in Wisconsin. So how ours isn't timely, that's what's difficult to understand. You file a map believing that our courts will do the right thing. It's not complaining about it. It's just trying to get something accomplished that's fair for the people of Illinois and protects voters' rights. That's what we are after.
At a certain point, listen, I mean, you're not wrong. These maps are horrible. They're illegal. It's wrong. Chris also makes a valid point, because I've gotten in trouble for saying this. I do get a little annoyed every time it's like we lose or we don't pick up seats, and it's just go back to bitching about the maps. So I think you're both right on this, but it certainly was a good debate, and thank you, gentlemen, for having it. All right, let's go to this. I want to go to something positive because I want to give some kudos here. I'm in love with the fight I'm seeing out of Republicans in Springfield. We saw individual members maybe fight to this level in the past, but I've never seen, not never, but for a long time, I haven't seen this level of coordinated effort and just overall fight. Some examples. Republicans in both the House and Senate are pushing hard to protect women in women's sports, girls and girls sports. Got a number of examples here with bills that are pushed forward and letters that are being sent, social media posts, ads, like actual real coordination on an issue. Now, my only concern is that issue doesn't poll super high as being one that people are really, really caring about. So I hope we don't just do it on this. But I see a significant level of coordination here. Our frequent guest, Mark Batnick, is smiling because I'm sure he's at least partially behind this. And I love to see the fight. I love to see it. You also see, on top of that, you see digital ads. House Republicans were running digital ads going after Katie Stewart because she wussed out and wouldn't even vote on her own bill multiple times. And they ran an ad about it, which I love. We got a street fight if we're going to win. We got a guerrilla warfare if we're going to win. The ad wasn't great, let's be real, but the fact that they ran it, we haven't been playing this kind of game before, so kudos to the House Republicans. Then there was the bill, House Bill 3332, which was pretty egregious. Even the Democrats couldn't vote on their own bill. And after that bill, I saw press release after press release after press release about every single vulnerable Democrat who refused to vote on it or was too afraid to vote on it, on the vulnerable Democrats who voted yes for it. There was a concerted effort by the PR shop from the House Republicans. Love to see it. And then press conferences. There's been a number of press conferences and bill packages. In the last few weeks, there's been a couple. I saw Swanson, Bunting, and Rosenthal as family farmers come out with a press conference on a number of family farmer issues and farming bills. And then recently, Jackie Haas and Jeff Kiker and Joe Sosnowski came out just before tax day, fighting back on taxes and highlighting, this tax day. Why are you paying such high taxes? It's because of the Democrats. This is a higher level of effort I've seen out of Republicans than I've seen in a long time, and I want to give kudos to them for this level of fight. If we're going to win, we need this level of fight 24/7 every day, not just during election season. So that's my point here. Kudos to Republicans. I don't know if anybody of you have other examples or other thoughts you want to share, but I do love to see the fight.
Well, I 100% agree, and then I also think that there has been more understanding of the need to fight on some of these local issues. Like, for example, in the Metro East, we have a lot of schools that would be impacted by the bill to force, school districts to change their mascots. And, we had a rally last Sunday. A lot of our legislators were there. On the Republican side, speaking, meeting with constituents. We had over 200 in attendance. So you need to be able to focus on those high level issues that impact the entire state, Collin, like you talked about. But you also have to, understand that there are some district or issues that are unique to a district that we also need to fight on, and House and Senate Republicans have been doing that as well.
Nice, good point. Any other thoughts on this? I mean, Dan, I know you're serving there. You're in the fight down there. I mean, I'm just giving kudos to you and your whole caucus and the Senate caucus. I mean, it's great to see you guys fighting. I know the two Toms who were on here. I remember you guys fighting hard when you were in. I just think it seems a lot more coordinated. It used to be a few of you fought, and then the rest, it was just like, hey guys, come on. Now we're seeing most, if not all, fighting, and I just love to see that.
Yeah, it's intentional to get everyone out there and try and be hammering every week, because in part, and this happened in the past, and I'm not saying anything about that. I'm just saying we're trying to get out there, making sure that the voters in Illinois know there are people still here fighting for them, and that there are issues that look, our state, the only problem our state has is how it's run. We get different government in here. We can be on fire again and doing great. So it's just making certain people know about the issues and hear about them. So that's the coordinated effort right now, and the intent is not to let up.
Well, I mean,
you have to.
Go ahead, Tom.
You have to talk about it now because, again, a few minutes ago we were talking about the campaign funding disparities. Now you have a little bit of a more level playing field where you can get your message out and you're not competing with a multi-million-dollar ad buy.
That's what, and listen, we talk about this all the time. I say we, as in my company, we push our candidates out a lot earlier than most people do for that reason. If you've got a funding disparity, we actually had this debate with Don Tracy and a few others just a few weeks ago, where during the early stages, when the Democrats aren't dumping their millions, like you just said, Tom, that's where you're not being outclassed when it comes to $1 to $50. You actually can get your message out. This is when we can fight, where there's a little bit more of an even playing field. So you're 100% correct. I mean, listen, I'm a little jealous. At some point, Republicans going to be in the governor's mansion, and they're going to have actual support from the legislature. And just because they're not dumbasses, we're going to see an economic renaissance in this state. And they're going to be heralded as the greatest leaders in the history of state government, because that's all it's going to take. I mean, the bar is set so low right now in this state that that's all it's going to take is don't trip over your own shoelaces, and you're going to be able to increase the economy and improve the economy in the state and lower costs for working families. I mean, that's the wonderful thing. We're not going to have to make too many changes here to see a turnaround in the state. We just got to get in position to do it. All right, let's move to our quick hit section. We call this our news you can use. As always, the point of this section of the podcast is to equip you, our viewers and our listeners, with things you need to be aware of, things you should be using in your email marketing, your fundraising, your social media, to emphasize the difference between the reasonable leadership you can get from Republican government versus the far left crazy progressive that we're getting right now at the state and federal level, and sometimes even at the local level. And so that's the point of this segment. We go through it pretty quickly, though. I'm going to imagine this first topic, a number of our panelists this week are going to have some thoughts. So this first one we might not go through as quickly, and it's understood why, because let's talk about it. Pritzker's head of tourism was caught in a massive conflict of interest. WGN reported that this guy called himself the face of Illinois tourism. Daniel Thomas, who's the head of Illinois tourism under J.B. Pritzker, which is within DCEO, was accused of having a massive conflict of interest by doing state business with a company that he owns. So basically profiting off of a company that he was sending business to as the leader of our tourism in this state. Of course, Pritzker, as always, Governor Gaslight was like, it's fine, guys. No big deal. One employee, not a big deal. Though this isn't the first time. It isn't the 10th time. It isn't probably the 50th time we have seen somebody under Pritzker's government and his agencies who have been caught in some sort of a scandal. So I'm sure you guys are going to have some thoughts on this one. We can spend a little time if you wish. Anybody have thoughts on this, on Pritzker's head of tourism enriching himself with tax dollars here?
I would just start with, it seems it's a never-ending problem in Illinois. We have a Speaker of the House that now has been convicted. I know he's going to appeal, but has been convicted. And, it started with J.B. Pritzker and the whole scandal with the removal of the toilets and the Cook County property taxes.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, listen, Joe Sosnowski, I know I've given him props a couple times this week, but I liked his quote on social media about this, which is if the governor and supermajority Democrats won't take ethics seriously, we're only going to see more mismanagement and bad behavior at our agencies. And he's not wrong. I mean, listen, this last week, there was a story about how some people were trying to push forward an ethics package, and Pritzker's response to that was, yeah, things are fine. We don't have to do much. And here's his quote. I call on anybody that's in public office today that is involved in anything corrupt whatsoever to get out of office. And then a Republican lawmaker texted, yeah, that plan's working out really well, isn't it? I mean, that's as far as Pritzker's willing to go on ethics. If you're doing something bad, please stop. That's it. That's all you get out of this governor.
I think it just shows, see this in places where it's related to campaign finances, related to bribes that elected officials are taking, related to steering contracts towards, a certain person or given jobs. These temptations are always going to be there, and there have to be checks and systems in place that prevent it from happening. You can't just rely on asking somebody, please be a good and ethical person or get out of office. We have to have something in there that prevents it from happening, because the temptation is always going to be there. And in Illinois, the temptation is there, and there's a culture of permitting quite a bit of these things that are, if not being outright illegal, are certainly in a gray ethical area.
Morrison, you were trying to get in. Go ahead.
No, we can move on.
All right, appreciate that. I got to give a hat tip to Patrick Finkston in the Illinois, where I got some of those quotes from. So thank you to Patrick. We've now shared that here on our podcast. All right, next one here. Another one. Another problem for the Pritzker administration. Though everything's fine, guys, Governor Gaslight will tell you. Pritzker's Department of Corrections is being sued in a class action lawsuit because of the abuse of people with mental illness in the state, in Illinois prisons. I've seen this get coverage, I think, nowhere, basically. I pulled it from the Uptown People's Law Center, middle of nothing. But nobody's covering this, but a lawsuit's being filed over this. That you can get into some of the details, but basically in our prisons in Illinois under JB Pritzker, it's egregious how little support those with mental illness have. And now there's a class action lawsuit, which maybe it goes nowhere, but here again, we're seeing problems under Pritzker with the lack of leadership from the governor who'd rather be president.
I just say it's pretty typical of how most of these agencies have run. We've had problems with IDES, we've had problems with IDFPR. Now it's Department of Corrections. I'm still waiting to hear one that's getting applause.
Yeah, I mean, and we haven't even talked about DCFS this week, but that is, that's the worst run agency, and right. Of course, nobody seems to want to do anything about it. All right, let's go to the next one. So this is going to get a little bit in the weeds, but please stay with us. Let's talk venue shopping. So there was an effort to reduce venue shopping in Illinois, which is keeping people from being able to choose to file their lawsuit in a place where they might get a more favorable ruling from a judge. Democrats in Illinois and Pritzker and Kwame Raoul wanted to make sure that the only lawsuits that could be filed about things they were doing in Illinois could only be filed in Sangamon County and in Chicago, places where they knew they could get more favorable rulings. They didn't want any other judges in Illinois to have any sort of say in the constitutionality of a lawsuit or of a law or a Pritzker executive order. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you see Kwame Raoul and JB Pritzker doing massive amounts of venue shopping when they make sure they file every lawsuit they can against President Trump in any sort of favorable court that they can find. It was just the reason why this is in the news is it was just in the Supreme Court in Illinois, where there was an effort to stop this lockdown of supposed venue shopping in Madison County? I think it was, Madison County. The Supreme Court slapped that down. So in Illinois, yet again, the rule is if you want to go after any sort of law that's passed, or if you think Pritzker did something that's unconstitutional, the only places you can file a lawsuit are Chicago or Sangamon County. Talk about you can't get justice anywhere but where they want you to get justice. Brian Drew, kudos to him on social media, had a great comment about this because the Supreme Court said that this was about, this isn't inconvenient. You can just drive to Sangamon County, not a big deal. Drew said this, he said, be honest, it's not about convenience, it's about control. And that's absolutely 100% true. They want to make sure that any challenges are in Democrat-dominated jurisdictions where the judges are overwhelmingly aligned with the governor and the AG. That's obviously what's happening here. He said it's a blatant attempt to tilt the scales of justice and protect political power. Anybody have thoughts?
Well, you got to give a shout out to Justice David Overstreet as well for being the dissenter in this case, because it's absolutely absurd that these cases can only be heard in 2 counties in the entire state. All these other judges are, elected by the voters. Like, and forcing people to drive, 2, 3, 4 hours to get a court hearing on an issue of constitutionality. It's just embarrassing.
And Michael, don't we constantly see this? I mean, I'm speaking for you and our many viewers and watchers in Southern Illinois. This idea that you can just go to Sangamon County, it's not that big of a deal. Like, they don't recognize that Springfield is center of the state. Like, there's an entire half of the state south of that, some of which would have to drive 3 to 4 hours to get to the Sangamon County courthouse or wherever it might be. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. That's not impeding your justice at all. Every time there's a hearing, you just got to drive 3 or 4 hours one way, but you're cool. Like, that's not an impediment to justice. I mean, it's just, again, a lack of understanding by these Chicago judges, and in some cases, Sangamon County, but really Chicago politicians and judges who don't recognize there's a whole state here that they're supposed to represent. And also, by the way, if you're watching this as a Republican or Republican leader, if this is the rule, then we got to play the game. You watch what the Democrats are doing to Trump and to the congressional Republicans right now, filing a lawsuit over every time they sneeze or have a press conference, let alone try to pass a law or put an executive order in. We should be doing the exact same damn thing. Every time Pritzker files an executive order, every time there's a law that's passed, we should be fighting that in the courts. And yeah, fine, you got to take it to Chicago or Sangamon County. That also means that anytime there's a Sangamon County judgeship open, we should be fighting in that. The whole state Republican Party needs to be fighting that, not just the Sangamon County Republicans, not just some of the local township organizations. The whole state should be playing in that race, and we should be investing significant resources, because if there's one place we're not going to get favorable judges in Chicago, we might get them in Sangamon County. And so that should be a consistent effort. There should be a Republican Judges Association of Illinois where we put significant effort into fighting these battles in the courts and fighting for these judicial races. All right, next one. We've talked about it a couple times here in the podcast. Let's show some things on screen. If you're watching this, you'll see it on screen as Lane will add it in post. If you're listening, don't worry. We will describe what we're talking about. But there are 3 different ways, 3 different rankings that show that Illinois' property taxes are the highest in the country. Let's talk about the state level taxes. It was just shown, you'll see it up on screen if you're watching, that Illinois has the highest tax rate of any state in this country, significantly higher than our neighbors. But if you don't want to look at that one, okay, fine, let's look at counties. So we look at the 50 highest counties for property taxes in the country. 50 of them. Illinois has 27 of the top 50. We'll say that again. Of the 50 highest in the whole country, over half of them is in one state, our state. That's not enough for you, fine. Let's look at the metro areas. If you look at the metro areas around the country, the top 4 are right here in Illinois. The top 5 out of 6 are right here in Illinois. Our property taxes, our taxes in general, but especially our property taxes, are absolutely out of control.
Yeah, this is again, this all comes together for families every single year. They talk about cost of living. Literally, just the cost of having a home in Illinois is a bill that you never stop paying. And at some level, people are starting to evaluate what's the quality of the goods and services I'm getting. Is my school head and shoulders above any other school in the country? No, and we're falling short on a lot of basic measures of how effective our government is, yet we're paying some of the highest prices to get that ineffective government.
Yeah, kudos to you, Tom. I'm gonna just guess or hope that you had some influence. I know IPI, the organization you're working with, had done some polling, and it was really pushing like the tax angle. And then I love the press release because all the quotes in the press release were cost of living, which that's what this is. It's one part of the larger cost of living. So kudos to you and for emphasizing that it's really about the overall cost of living.
I was going to say, that Illinois Revenue Alliance that I cited earlier, their study, they said, we've got to fund more affordable housing. And every time I was in a legislative forum or something with my local suburban Democrats, I would say property taxes are part of that. And again, the disconnect. I was talking with a voter. This was like 10 years ago, and I was talking about property taxes. She said, "I don't pay property taxes." What do you mean you don't pay property taxes? Oh no, I rent.
Yep.
And I was like, well, where do you think your landlord is paying property taxes? He's just passing that on to you. And it was just like, hello,
Yeah.
So just that disconnect. But anyway, again, more units of government, unfunded mandates that are constantly passed down. I harped big time on the tampon machines in the boys' bathrooms. I mean, okay, is that a huge dollar amount? No, but it's just another example of crazy lunatic policies out of Springfield imposing these policies on local government, your school districts, your local municipalities, and then saying, okay, you property taxpayers, you got to pay for that. You got to pay for our crazy ideology.
Yeah, well, and Tom, don't you see it? I mean, yeah, there are good school districts and bad school districts. I certainly admit that. But a lot of times, you look at their budgets, are like, all of this is locked. Like, all this is the state of Illinois is mandated. We don't have a choice. Like, we don't want to spend all this money, but it's mandate after mandate after mandate, and they're unfunded, so that they have to come up with something to pay it. That's your property taxes.
That's right. And I wanted to say something about that Tom said too when he talked about comparing school districts around the country. And I think that's a really important point, because you could look at different school districts around Illinois and say, oh, this one is marginally better than that one. But we really need to be looking nationwide. Sure. Because the populace is mobile, especially those middle and upper income families. But even lower income families too decide, you know what, I'm done with Illinois. I could actually purchase a home and live reasonably well in a lower cost of living state. And so, at pretty much every income scale, people are looking at what is best for them, and more importantly, what's best for their kids.
Yep. Well, and just because I like making work for our producer, I'll add one more visual here, because I saw this while I was on vacation. There's a visual about the highest tax rates, or the highest tax states in the country. And of course, it's Hawaii, California, the Northeast, and Illinois, which you'll see on your screen, because of course, that's how it works. All right, last one here. This is good news, but I don't see enough messaging coming out of Washington, D.C., which is the good news focus. So I'm trying to maybe nudge us a little bit here, where all the focus is on how the economy is going awful and these tariffs are ruining everything. Well, one of the points of the tariffs is to onshore manufacturing, bring those jobs back to America. And kudos to TMA for putting this out. The SBA is reporting that there's been a massive increase in the first 90 days of the Trump administration on the number of loans that are going to small to mid-sized manufacturers. A 74% increase since compared to the same period during the start of the Biden administration. That's huge. We don't hear this coming out of the White House, but they should be talking about it. That the point of all this, yeah, they've screwed it up. The way they're doing the tariffs is frustrating and awful, and I will absolutely admit that. But the point is to bring jobs back to America. The point is to bring manufacturing back to America. When you look at a 74, not 10, not 20, 74% increase in loans being taken out by small manufacturers who are trying to grow and invest and create more jobs and produce more in this country, that is the point of this. And that's a positive sign that may lead, and hopefully will lead, to positive economic output in the coming months and years. So something we could be talking about as you hear all the negative naysaying about tariffs, and I get it because we've screwed it up, but there is some positive here, and we should be talking about it.
I think too, there's going to be a lot of attention on some of the big announcements. Everybody wants to announce a new automobile manufacturing plant with 5,000 jobs, but the reality is one of our greatest strengths is this wide network of small and mid-sized manufacturers who maybe they won't totally change their business model, but maybe they'll branch out into an affiliated field, start to make one or two more components or products, things where they already sort of have some synergies in place. That can fuel quite a bit of economic growth from something that's already established here, somebody with expertise, with a facility, with a workforce, and maybe it opens the door for them to diversify their business a little bit.
Totally.
Just to add on to what Tom's saying is, fortunately, because of what's going on, Illinois is set to benefit greatly, and I'm sure the current administration will take full credit for it, not in Washington, but here in Springfield, because we have so many small and mid-sized manufacturers still here in Illinois. We used to have a lot more, and we used to have a lot more large manufacturers, and we need to get heading that direction again too. But they'll benefit, so we'll do better, and we're going to need to thank the people in Washington for that. Do want to add, we have heard from one local steel manufacturer, our caucus did, and I was told that they are reporting to us that since the steel tariffs went in place, they have had an increase in business and they have upped their employment here in the state. So it's beneficial.
I mean, gee, I wish what we're talking about now is what they were actually talking about nationally. Go put that manufacturer, go put that steel worker, the someone on that plant, put them on TV, put a few $1 million behind a TV ad buy. Let's get the actual story out. But whatever. I'll keep complaining and whining about our lack of messaging and communication skills until I die, I guess. All right, let's go to our final couple segments. As always, we have some fun here with our OG and Clowns of the Week nominations. Our panel can nominate anybody they wish. Illinois, ideally, but it could be national. Political, ideally, but it could be anything. There's no rules. Whatever. We're just having some fun. Any OGs and clowns that you guys want to give some praise to or some scorn? What do you guys got?
Well, on Clown of the Week, I've got two. The first one, Katie Stewart, she actually, to her credit, voted no on the mascot bill, but she was invited by multiple constituents to attend our rally on Sunday, and she gave them the runaround for 3 or 4 days, and then eventually said, "Oh, my schedule is just so booked I can't make it." So she votes with the Republicans on this bill, but then when it comes time to put her money where her mouth is, nowhere to be seen. And then also, yeah, and also I saw this morning Brandon Johnson was in Springfield advocating for more tax increases on behalf of the Chicago Teachers Union. And if I mean, obviously we're worried about these tax increases, but if Brandon Johnson is going to be one of their mouthpieces to advocate for this, that really pumps the brakes, I think, on their plans.
I mean, the face of these tax increases is Brandon Johnson and CTU. That ain't going to play super well for him. You're totally right. Anybody else have any OGs or clowns you want to throw in there?
I'll throw in a clown. One of the funniest quotes I heard. I mean, I laughed out loud several times. So Tim Walz was interviewed at Harvard University and said that Kamala Harris was the most qualified person to run for president in our country's history. So
we were having some fun at his expense because he also talked about how he was put on the ticket. What was it, Michael or Chris? He was put on the ticket to give permission to white men to vote for Kamala.
Yeah, that's basically it. He's like, "Hey, I play football. I change my own oil. Vote Democrat." It's like, okay, yeah, right. Good luck with that.
Yeah, Tom, good addition.
I'll give an OG to Tom Demmer. I thought his tweet was hilarious. Just trolling people. And again, the media is just constantly looking for something to print, something to post. And so, I mean, he just spoon-fed that one. That was great.
My clown of the week is a representation of a larger problem. My clown of the week is U.S. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. In the aftermath of Pope Francis dying a week and a half ago, Marjorie Taylor Greene stated, "Evil is being defeated by the hand of God." And after Catholic organizations and groups rightfully condemned her for saying such a thing while a man is lying dead, she doubled down by saying that the Catholic bishops are controlled by Satan. So these are what we are dealing with in the United States of America today. I am so sick and tired of people who do not belong to my religion feeling like they have the right to tell my religion what it's supposed to believe and then dance on the Pope's grave after he dies. Many of you may disagree with things Pope Francis said about one thing or another, and that's fine, but he was the leader of my religion, and I'm sick and tired of conservatives and liberals dancing on his grave or telling the church who has right to go. Thank you.
Chris, the only thing I'll say to that is I believe God is the leader of your religion, but we can debate that off screen if you'd like.
You know what I mean by that, Collin. Obviously, God is the head of the church, and the Pope is the head of the church.
I just like causing you problems, that's all. Tom, it looks like you're trying to go in. Go ahead. Or did I misread?
I
misread that. All right, I got some. I got some.
I'm still so humbled by Tom's nomination.
We're going to give you an award.
I'm touched.
All right, I got a couple here. So let's talk. I like to highlight good examples of good government, and especially in our schools. So I want to highlight Niles Township High School District 219. I know nothing about the township, not involved with it, or the district. I'm not involved with it. All I know is what I read in the story. So there may be other things going on. I don't know, but I want to give kudos to this. They cut 7 administrators in their restructuring plan, specifically calling out that they were in tough financial times and they wanted to make sure that the money they had was going to students. And they talk about how they want to be more efficient with taxpayer dollars. And so for that, I give them OG of the Week nomination. Just the idea. Again, you got to lead by example. And so seeing a school district say, hey, Times are tough for taxpayers. We want to put our money into classrooms. I like to see that. So I'm going to give him an OG nomination for that. Chris is going to like this. During the draft, Clay Matthews going up on stage with the President Trump gave me a message. The Bears still suck while the draft was happening in Green Bay. I couldn't even be mad about it. That was really, honestly, quite epic, and it was pretty awesome. So, Chris, kudos to you, and I'll give that whole thing from Clay Matthews an OG of the Week nomination. It was pretty epic. I got some clowns. I will say I have had 3 weeks worth of clowns, so I cut it back because I know we only have so much time. So I'm going to do this fast. But while I was on vacation, I saw Mayor Johnson come out with a stat that said that 87% of transit ridership came from Chicago. And I immediately looked over at Abby, my wife, and said, he's going to regret that because somebody at some point is going to say, okay, if 80% of the riders are yours, then 80% of the funding should come from you. It took a while, but eventually a reporter finally got there and said, okay, well, if 80% of the riders are yours, then are you going to come up with 87% of the funding? Of course, Johnson just said a whole bunch of words that meant nothing. But the reality is Chicago funds half of that 87%. The money coming from them is just 44%, and yet 87% of the riders are from Chicago. So it's a decent point that maybe Chicago should pony up a little bit. So Johnson with the unforced error there, someone on his team who knew politics should have told him, don't say this, it's going to bite us in the butt. Another thing for Mayor Johnson, talking about how they have this budget shortfall, $1.12 billion budget shortfall, which has been talked about for a very long time, even before Trump was in office. But now he's down in Springfield this week saying, well, now we need more money because we've got a budget shortfall because of Trump, because there might be some cuts coming. Wait a second. You need more money because there might be cuts. You've got a structural deficit. That ain't Trump's problem. You've been building towards this for a long time, but both Trump or Pritzker and Johnson have been using this line like it's all because there might be cuts coming out of D.C. No. Your overspending for years put you in this spot, not any executive orders by the president over the last 100 days. All right, let's move on. I'm going to save that one for last because it's a good one. Let's talk about this, the Chicago Reader. So there's a story in the Chicago Reader, which, again, I think came out while we were on vacation, where we've talked about this bill a couple times on these podcasts. There's a bill down in Springfield by some extremists who want to reduce the distance that sex offenders have to live away from schools and parks. It used to be 500 feet. They want it to be 250 feet. Basically, the summary is they want to let sex offenders live closer to schools. So that a full-throated defense of this in the Chicago Reader by the groups that were behind this, they had this full-throated defense about, hey, this guy, Ed Setwinski, is struggling to find a place to live. That's why we need to make this change. This poor guy. So I just went online and looked up this poor guy. Turns out he's a sexual predator of a victim who is 15 years old. And he was accused and found guilty of criminal sexual assault of a victim between 13 and 17. That's the face. That's who they want to make sure can live closer to schools. Talk about a massive fail and con of the week. If that's the face of your movement, you're doing something wrong. So Kimberly Lightfoot, Adrian Johnson, Mary Edley Allen for your Senate Bill 2254 major clown of the week nomination. Couple more and I'm done. Let's talk about a school district in Summit, Illinois. I gave kudos to a good one. Let's talk about a bad one. Argo Community High School. The superintendent of this high school was caught by WGN charging to the district credit card all sorts of charges for adult websites, porn sites, a sexting service, and even some male medical treatment. You can read into what that means, and it is exactly what you think. And this dude was charging it to the school district's credit card. And so let's name him William Tulios, whoever it is. Kudos to WGN for unearthing.
Tulios.
What is it, Chris?
Tulios.
There we go. You gave me a chance to puff my cigar real quick. All right.
Actually, Collin, can I add something to that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this was like an issue during the recent school board elections, but like nobody paid attention to it. Until there was a candidate who was running and was bringing up the fact that the superintendent was doing all of this, but none of the incumbent board members like said anything about it. And now that after they've won re-election is when they can sack the guy. Like that's what's going on here, folks. That's what I have to ask.
Yeah, well, good addition. Well done. Two left and I'm done. So this is not really a clown. It's just sort of, guess what? You got what you wished. For those who came on this podcast and said it would be better if Aurora Mayor Richard Irvin lost, let me just tell you what you got for that, because he did lose. And the mayor-elect, John Leish, is an uber-left progressive. But here's what you got for it. Here's the fruits of your labor. He's just appointed Shannon Cameron as his chief of staff. Who is Shannon Cameron? She's openly a partisan Democrat, in what's supposed to be a nonpartisan role. And and she hasn't ever, let's see here, she's never had a job in the private sector or the government sector, and she's a proud supporter publicly of Black Lives Matter. She uses terms like comrades for all of her fellow activists. This is a far-left socialist who's now the chief of staff for the city of Aurora, all because you wanted to throw out the Republican you thought wasn't pure enough, and now this is what you get. So congratulations, you got what you asked for. Last one here is going to get me in trouble, but I don't care. So Rich Miller in his Cat Facts subscriber section said something that I'm not going to quote because I respect the fact that it's only for subscribers, but he basically slightly nudged Pritzker when he said, hey, listen, this is my state. I love my state. I never let anything happen to my state. And if you want to run for president, you got to still focus on this state, but I think you're still doing an okay job. It's okay. Here's how he worded it, though. He said, and his agencies, Pritzker's agencies, while far from great, are not recently falling into further disrepair. That was his justification for it's okay, Pritzker could run for president because the agencies, which are all crappy, aren't doing anything even worse right now, so it's okay. Meanwhile, in this podcast, we talked about the problem at Decchio. We talked about recently DOJ coming in and investigating Pritzker's mismanagement. The problems at DCFS. We talked about the problems at the Department of Corrections. If this is okay to you, Rich Miller, if this is, I love Illinois, you got to come through me to ruin Illinois, but you're okay with all the problems in Pritzker's administration because he's not here, he's not being an active governor, then I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Like, there are serious problems in the state because this governor doesn't care about this state. And if that's not enough for you to be like, hey, dude, maybe it's time to move on so someone could be governor who actually cares about Illinois, then I guess to quote, God, of course, I'm going to ruin this whole thing by forgetting his name. The coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, Andy Reid, great googly moogly. What will it take for you to say there's problems in this state? Are you that far up Pritzker's butt that you can't admit that there's some problems? So that's my last clown of the week. All right, as always, we end with closing statements. Every panelist gets a chance to close on whatever topic they wish. We'll start with our team so that our guests can go last. Chris, go ahead and give your closing thoughts.
So I hope everybody's had a great couple of weeks. It's been a fun week with Durbin announcing he's not running for re-election, so that's been fun. Over the past few weeks, I've been hearing a lot of Republicans talk about permanent vote by mail and all these stuff going on here and how we got to do this, got to do that before the 2026 cycle. And listen, here's what I'm going to tell you. Put a plan together. Sit down with your teams, put a plan together. Because right now, all I'm seeing is talk on Facebook. Sit down, determine what voters you're going to reach, who you need to get to do certain jobs. Put a plan together. Don't just keep it in your head. You know, there are resources out there. There are other great consultants, operatives around this state who will be more than willing to help your organization put together a plan. Put a plan together in anticipation of the upcoming cycle. Don't just let words be words. Put a thought together. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Going to take the work. You can't just wish it. You can't just post on Facebook. You got to actually do some work if you want to make change. Agreed. Michael, your closing thoughts.
Well, I was just going to say, we're about 3 months and a week away from petition circulation. So now it's time for everybody to be duck farmers, get your ducks in a row, because we got to get some good candidates and running for these offices, because as we've talked about previously, nobody's really popped up yet. And there's opportunities before us if we're willing to put in the work and take advantage of them.
Agreed. You brought the heat, but I'm letting our guests go last. So good work this week, Michael. All right, to our guests, you all did great. So there's no specific order here. Tom Morrison, if you want to give your final thoughts.
Yeah, to pivot or to dovetail what Michael just said, it's really, really important to start early. Collin, you said it earlier too. You have to start early. I mean, I've had there are Democrats around me in the northwest suburbs who are so far left, but they were able to win their races because they started knocking doors really early. I mean, right after the last map was done, they were out knocking on doors. Before the map was done, certified, they were out knocking on doors. And they continue to do that for the next year plus. I was able to win my races by starting really, really early. So I want to press that. And then the second thing is, I got two final thoughts. Today we're recording this on Thursday, so today's a National Day of Prayer. And I've been thinking about this a lot. Some of the issues that we're dealing with at the local, state, and federal level, international level, are very difficult. And the general public puts so much has such little space or patience for some of these issues and resolving these things. These are really, really hard, difficult things. So I'm committing to pray for elected officials regardless of whether they're on our side or not. We need to be praying for these people. We need to be praying for healing in this country. And I'll leave with Psalm 127, verse 1. Go ahead and look that up. Psalm 127, verse 1.
Well, Tom, I mean, you're right. I've talked to my wife this week about it. Like, I don't know where this goes with Pritzker pushing violence, with this, we're sort of circling the drain. It's getting worse and worse. I think you should be rightfully concerned about the direction we're headed as a country, because we're just getting more and more violent, more and more unwilling to solve problems and actually work with each other. And something major has to happen here.
And a lot of these, I mean, yeah, some of these things are political solutions, but some of them, the government cannot solve it. A conservative or a Republican politician is not going to be able to solve it. These are very deep and entrenched problems, and we need to be humble and recognize that.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I appreciate the thought. Tom Demmer, your final thoughts for the week.
First, very well said, Tom Morrison. That was I think a great point about we have to have a little bit of humility in how we approach some of these very challenging problems. They're not going to be somebody who comes in and saves the day and just makes everything, all of our challenges and issues go away. And I think that kind of should tie into the thought about for candidates right now who are thinking about running. You don't have to have a plan in place to solve every single problem. You don't have to have a strategy in place that says, oh, I'm certainly going to win. Talk about some issue you care about, bring it to the forefront, try to engage and connect with the voters around it, help us move the ball forward, and understand that it's not any one race, it's not any one election cycle, it's not any one candidate. It really has to be a coordinated effort to try to improve your community, improve your state, improve your country. And that takes a long time, and it takes a lot of stumbles and failures along the way. But there's a way to move forward. And if we talk about issues we actually care about and actually matter to people, that's the most effective way of helping to move that ball forward.
Love it, Tom. Thanks. Dan Ugaste, thank you for being with us. You get the final word, my friend.
Well, thanks for having that. The political world's pretty much been covered. So since I'm still down here in Springfield, I'll bring this. After 7 years in the super minority, I'm going to tell you it's May, and nothing good ever happens, it seems, in May. And it comes quick, and it comes at the end of May and at the dark of night when people aren't watching. And I'm sure it's going to happen again, because even though it seems like the crazy's been tampered down a little bit this year, there are a lot of working groups going on, and we're talking there's going to be a lot of omnibus bills coming out. They're going to have a lot to them. So everyone pay attention, keep their eyes open, and watch for bills coming through, especially to get the message out for people to file witness slips on things that matter, because some things have been kept at abeyance so far, but the concern is they'll move out in the middle of the night with a bunch of other things attached.
I mean, a lot of people think that the strategy is lull people to sleep. You got the shell bills ready to go, sneak it through last minute. Whether it's the homeschool bill or anything else, the stuff's not dead until it's dead, and it's not dead. So people got to watch. And I know, Dan, you and others down there are doing a good job keeping us all informed. We'll do our job here in the podcast once a week to let all of you know, our viewers and our listeners, what you need to be paying attention to. Thank you for being with us on this journey. We'll catch you next week on the Smoke-Filled Room.